Ex-Mill claimed that my baby was her grandchild, then my partner's mom demanded a paternity test to prove that it is her son's. So we cut contact and now she's spreading lies about us. Okay, Reddit, I genuinely need some advice. I'm 29F, and my partner, Mark, 30M, and I just had our daughter, Lily, 2 weeks ago. Lily is amazing, healthy, and the absolute light of our lives. Getting here, however, has been a saga worthy of a daytime soap opera, and it all boils down to two incredibly difficult mothers, my ex-mother-in-law, and Mark's mom. To understand the current mess, I need to give you some backstory. I was married before, very briefly. I met my ex-husband, let's call him David, 31M, when I was 22. We were young, impulsive, and thought we were madly in love. We got married after dating for about 8 months. It was a disaster almost from the start. We were just fundamentally incompatible. We argued constantly, about everything from how to load the dishwasher, seriously, to our long-term goals. He wanted to stay in our small hometown forever, buy a house with a white picket fence, and start popping out kids immediately. I wanted to focus on my career, and maybe think about kids in my late 20s. We were married for a little over a year before we both realized it was a mistake. There was no big dramatic blow-up, no infidelity, just a slow, agonizing realization that we were making each other miserable. We decided to get divorced. It was surprisingly amicable. We didn't hate each other, we just recognized we were better off apart. We didn't have any shared assets or kids, so the legal process was relatively straightforward. My parents were supportive. They'd never been huge fans of David, they thought he was a bit boring, to be honest, and they just wanted me to be happy. David's mom, though? She was a different story. Let's call her Susan. She's the type of woman who has her entire life planned out, and she expects everyone around her to follow that plan, whether they like it or not. She's also deeply religious and believes that divorce is a sin, no matter the circumstances. Susan had this vision of David and me as the perfect, traditional couple. She was devastated when we split up. She tried everything to get us to work things out, including guilt trips, tearful phone calls, and even showing up at my apartment unannounced with a marriage counselor in tow. It was incredibly awkward and uncomfortable. I tried to be polite and respectful, but I also had to be firm. I told her that I appreciated her concern, but the decision was final. The divorce was finalized about 7 years ago. I moved to a different city, got a great job, and basically started a whole new life. I cut off contact with David and Susan. It wasn't out of malice, it was just necessary for me to move on. We weren't friends on social media, and we didn't have any mutual friends, so it was a clean break. Then, about a year and a half ago, I met Mark. We met at a work conference. We started chatting during a coffee break, and we just clicked. He was funny, smart, kind, and shared my passion for travel and adventure. We exchanged numbers, and we started dating soon after. Mark knew about my previous marriage from the very beginning. It wasn't a secret. I told him the whole story on our second date, and he was completely unfazed. He said it was in the past, and it didn't change how he felt about me. He'd had a few long-term relationships himself, so he understood that not everything works out. We fell in love quickly. It was different from my relationship with David. With Mark, it felt easy, natural, and exciting. We had so much in common, and just generally enjoyed each other's company. About 6 months into our relationship, I met Mark's parents. His dad, John, and he's the sweetest, most laid-back guy you'll ever meet. He welcomed me with open arms and made me feel like part of the family immediately. Mark's mom, Carol, however, was a different story. Carol is complicated. She's very polished, very proper, and very, very opinionated. She's also incredibly attached to Mark, who is her only child. From the moment I met her, I could sense that she was sizing me up and finding me lacking. She was polite, but there was a definite chill in the air. She made a few subtle digs about my divorce. Nothing outright rude, but little comments like, "Oh, you've been married before? That's interesting," or, "I always believed that marriage is forever, no matter what." She also made it clear that she expected Mark to settle down and have a traditional family, just like Susan had wanted for David. I tried to brush it off. I figured she was just protective of her son, and I hoped that she would warm up to me eventually. But she never really did. She was always polite, but never genuinely friendly. She'd ask me questions about my job and my family, but it always felt like an interrogation, not a conversation. Then, about 8 months ago, I found out I was pregnant. It was a surprise, but a happy one. Mark and I had talked about kids in the future, but we weren't actively trying. We were both thrilled, though. We decided not to get married right away. I'd been through one rushed wedding, and I didn't want to repeat that experience. I wanted to make sure that we were getting married for the right reasons, not just because we were having a baby. Mark completely understood and supported my decision. We told our families. My parents were ecstatic. They've always wanted grandchildren. John was equally thrilled. He started talking about building a treehouse and teaching the baby how to fish. Carol, predictably, was not happy. She didn't say anything outright negative, but her disapproval was clear. She kept saying things like, "Well, I suppose it's not the traditional way to do things," and, "I just hope you're both prepared for the challenges of parenthood." She also started hinting very strongly that we should get married before the baby arrived. The pregnancy itself was relatively smooth. I had some morning sickness in the first trimester, but overall, I felt good. Mark was incredibly supportive. He went to all my doctor's appointments, read all the baby books, and even started learning how to cook, which was a minor miracle. Throughout the pregnancy, Carol continued to be a source of stress. She'd call me regularly, ostensibly to check on me, but the calls always ended up feeling like lectures. She'd tell me what I should be eating, how much I should be exercising, and what kind of parenting books I should be reading. She even sent me a list of approved baby names, all of which were incredibly old-fashioned and stuffy. I tried to be patient and understanding. I knew she was just trying to be helpful, in her own way. But it was exhausting. I felt like I was constantly being judged and criticized. Then, about a month before my due date, something completely unexpected happened. I got a text message from a number I didn't recognize. It said, "Is this Op? It's Susan, David's mom. We need to talk. It's about the baby." My heart dropped. I hadn't spoken to Susan in years. Why was she contacting me now? And what did she mean, "It's about the baby"? I showed the text to Mark. He was just as confused as I was. We decided that I should call her back and find out what was going on. I called Susan, and she answered immediately. She sounded frantic. She said, "I know this is going to sound crazy, but I think the baby you're carrying is David's." I was speechless. I literally couldn't comprehend what she was saying. "What? Susan, that's impossible. I haven't seen David in years." She explained that she'd seen a picture of me on social media. Apparently, one of my distant relatives had tagged me in a photo, and I was clearly pregnant. She'd done some research, which I'm pretty sure means stalking my online profiles, and had concluded that the timing could work out. She was convinced that I'd secretly gotten back together with David and that this baby was his. I tried to explain to her, as calmly as I could, that she was completely wrong. I told her about Mark, about how long we'd been together. But she wouldn't listen. She kept insisting that I was lying and that I needed to come clean for the sake of the baby. The conversation ended with her threatening to show up at the hospital when I went into labor. I hung up the phone, feeling completely shaken and bewildered. I told Mark everything. He was furious. He couldn't believe that Susan would accuse me of something so outrageous. He wanted to call her himself and give her a piece of his mind, but I convinced him not to. I didn't want to escalate the situation. We decided to ignore Susan and hope that she would come to her senses. We figured she was just grasping at straws, desperate for her son to have a child. Then, 2 weeks ago, I went into labor. It was a long and difficult labor, but eventually, our beautiful daughter, Lily, was born. Mark was with me the entire time, and he was amazing. We were in the recovery room, exhausted but euphoric, when there was a commotion outside the door. Suddenly, Susan burst into the room, followed by a very bewildered-looking security guard. She started yelling, "That's my grandchild. I know it. Op, you need to tell the truth. You've been lying to everyone." It was a complete nightmare. I was still recovering from childbirth, I was hormonal, and I was utterly humiliated. Mark stepped in and told Susan to leave, but she refused. It took 2 security guards to physically remove her from the room. The whole incident was incredibly upsetting. I was furious with Susan. After we got home from the hospital, I decided to call David. I hadn't spoken to him in years, but I felt like I needed to clear the air and make sure he knew what his mother had done. He answered the phone, sounding surprised to hear from me. I explained the situation, and he was horrified. He apologized profusely for his mother's behavior. He explained that he'd been dating someone new, a woman named Serene. Serene and I share a similar first name, although not exactly the same. It's like, imagine my name is Serena and hers is Serene. Close, but different. David had been keeping Serene a secret from his mom, Susan. He knew how obsessed Susan was with him getting remarried and having kids, and he didn't want to deal with her pressure. Apparently, about a month ago, Susan had overheard David talking to Serene on the phone. She'd misheard the name, thinking he'd said my name. She'd immediately jumped to the conclusion that David and I had gotten back together. David, being a bit of a coward, his words, not mine, hadn't corrected her. He figured it was easier to let her believe what she wanted than to deal with her reaction to his new relationship. He told her that I wanted to keep things quiet, which is why she hadn't heard from me. Then, on the day I went into labor, Susan's sister happened to be at the same hospital for a routine appointment. She had only met me a couple of times, years ago, but she knew Susan's obsession with me and David. When she saw me, hugely pregnant, being rushed to labor and delivery, she immediately called Susan. That's how Susan ended up in my hospital room, convinced I was carrying her grandchild. David apologized profusely. He said he was an idiot, that he should have told his mom the truth a long time ago. He also told me that he tried to talk to his mother, but she refused to believe him. She was convinced that he was just covering for me. He said he and Susan were moving to another state, to be closer to Serene, and that I wouldn't have to worry about her anymore. I told him I appreciated the apology, but that what he and his mother had done was incredibly damaging. I told him I never wanted to speak to him or Susan again. Mark was listening to the whole conversation. He was furious. He said he couldn't believe how selfish and irresponsible David and Susan had been. It confirmed that I wasn't crazy. But it didn't solve the bigger problem, Carol. Mark had told his parents about the incident at the hospital, of course. John was appalled. He couldn't believe that Susan would do something so outrageous. Carol, however, was surprisingly quiet. She didn't defend Susan, but she didn't condemn her either. She just said, well, it's certainly a complicated situation. Then, a few days later, Carol came to visit us. She brought a gift for Lily, a very expensive baby blanket that was totally not my style. She held Lily for a few minutes, cooing over her, but then she got down to business. She said, Mark, I've been thinking a lot about this whole situation. And I think, for everyone's peace of mind, it would be best if you got a paternity test. I was stunned. I couldn't believe she was actually suggesting that. Mark looked at me, his eyes filled with a mixture of anger and apology. He said, Mom, I'm not doing that. I trust Op completely. This is ridiculous. Carol didn't back down. She said, it's not about trust, Mark. It's about being responsible. You need to know for sure. What if Susan is right? What if this baby is David's? I finally spoke up. I said, Carol, I can assure you, this baby is Mark's. I haven't been with anyone else since we met. This is insulting. She looked at me with a cold, hard stare. I'm just trying to protect my son, she said. I'm sure you understand. The conversation went downhill from there. It ended with Mark telling his mother that he wouldn't even consider a paternity test and that if she couldn't trust him and respect his relationship with me, then she wasn't welcome in our lives. She left in a huff, and we haven't spoken to her since. Mark has tried calling her a few times, but she hasn't answered. John has called Mark, and he's very upset about the whole situation. He's caught in the middle, and he doesn't know what to do. So, Reddit, here I am. I'm a new mom, trying to navigate the challenges of motherhood, and I'm also dealing with this insane family drama. I'm hurt and angry that Carol would question my integrity and Mark's paternity. I'm also worried about the long-term impact this will have on Mark's relationship with his mother. I told Carol that if she wanted to keep pushing the DNA test issue, she could kick rocks. I didn't use those exact words, of course. I was more polite, but the message was clear. I told her that if she couldn't accept that Lily was Mark's daughter without proof, then she didn't need to be a part of our lives. Aita? I want Mark to have a relationship with his mother, but I also refuse to be treated with such disrespect. And I definitely don't want my daughter to grow up around someone who doubts her parentage. Any advice or suggestions will be considered. Update 1. Wow, I didn't expect this post to blow up like this. Thank you to everyone for your support and advice. It's been incredibly validating to hear that I'm not crazy and that Carol's behavior is completely out of line. A lot of you suggested that I talk to Mark about setting some clear boundaries with his mother, and you're absolutely right. I had been avoiding the conversation because I was exhausted and didn't want to deal with more drama, but it needed to happen. So, last night, after Lily was asleep, Mark and I had a long talk. I told him how hurt and disrespected I felt by Carol's demand for a paternity test. I also told him that I was worried about the impact this was having on his relationship with his father, John. Mark completely understood. He said that he was furious with his mother, not just for the paternity test demand, but for her overall behavior throughout my pregnancy. He said that he'd been making excuses for her for years, but he was finally seeing her for who she really is, a controlling, manipulative woman who cares more about her own image than her son's happiness. He told me that he'd tried calling her again, but she still wasn't answering. He'd left her a voicemail, telling her that he was disappointed in her and that he wouldn't be contacting her again until she apologized to me and accepted Lily as his daughter, no questions asked. He also said that he'd spoken to John again. John is heartbroken by the situation. He loves Carol, but he also recognizes that she's in the wrong. He told Mark that he's considering staying with us for a while, just to get some space from Carol and to spend time with Lily. Mark and I agreed that we would welcome John with open arms. We have a spare bedroom, and Lily adores him. It would be great to have his help, and it would also give him a break from the toxic environment at home. A few of you asked about my parents and why they weren't more involved. That's a fair question, and I should have explained that in the original post. My parents live quite far away, on the other side of the country, actually. They're also both in their late 50s and not in the best of health. Traveling long distances is very difficult for them, especially with all the restrictions and concerns these days. We talk to them on video calls almost every day, and they adore Lily, even from afar. They're incredibly supportive of me and Mark, and they were furious when I told them about Susan's outburst at the hospital and Carol's subsequent behavior. They wish they could be here to help, but they just physically can't. They send their love and support, and that means the world to me. They also said if John needed a place to crash, they would happily chip in with some cash and ask me to find him a good retirement home. It was really sweet of them. So, that's where things stand right now. Carol is still giving us the silent treatment, John is thinking about moving in with us, and Mark and I are trying to focus on being parents to our amazing little girl. I'm no longer trying to appease Carol or tiptoe around her feelings. I'm putting my family first, and that's what matters most. I'll keep you updated on any further developments. Thanks again for all your support. Update 2. Well, things have escalated. John came to stay with us a few days ago. He brought a small suitcase and a very sad expression. He told us that Carol had barely spoken to him since Mark's last phone call. She'd been cold and distant, and he just couldn't take it anymore. He spent the first day mostly just cuddling Lily and talking to Mark. He seemed incredibly relieved to be away from the tension and negativity. He kept saying how much he loved Lily and how grateful he was to be able to spend time with her. Then, yesterday, Carol showed up at our door. Unannounced, of course. I was in the nursery, feeding Lily, when I heard the doorbell ring. Mark answered it, and I could hear Carol's voice, loud and shrill. I came out to the living room, and the scene was tense. Carol was standing in the doorway, looking furious. John was sitting on the couch, looking defeated. Mark was standing between them, his arms crossed. Carol demanded that John come home immediately. She said that he was being ridiculous and that he was embarrassing her. She accused me of manipulating him and turning him against her. John tried to speak, but Carol wouldn't let him get a word in edgewise. She just kept ranting and raving, accusing me of all sorts of things. Finally, Mark had had enough. He told Carol, in no uncertain terms, that she needed to leave. He said that she was not welcome in our home until she apologized to me and accepted Lily without reservation. Carol looked shocked. She clearly wasn't used to Mark standing up to her. She sputtered for a moment, then turned on her heel and stormed out, slamming the door behind her. The whole thing was incredibly stressful. I felt awful for John. He looked so lost and confused. He apologized to me repeatedly, even though he hadn't done anything wrong. Mark and I reassured him that he was welcome to stay with us for as long as he needed. We told him that we loved him and that we were happy to have him. After John went to bed, Mark and I talked. We both agreed that Carol's behavior was completely unacceptable. We decided that we needed to set some even firmer boundaries. Mark sent Carol a text message, telling her that we were going no contact until she sought professional help for her controlling behavior and apologized to both me and John. He said that we loved her, but we couldn't allow her to continue to disrespect us and disrupt our lives. It's been a couple of days, and we haven't heard from her. I'm not sure what to expect. Update 3. It's been about a week since Carol's dramatic visit. We haven't heard a peep from her. No calls, no texts, no angry emails. Nothing. John, on the other hand, has settled in nicely. He's a huge help with Lily, and he's clearly enjoying spending time with her. He reads to her, sings to her, and takes her for walks in the stroller. It's heartwarming to see. He's also started talking more openly about his marriage. He confided in Mark and me that he's been unhappy for years. He said that Carol has always been controlling, but it's gotten worse over time. He feels like he's lost himself in the relationship and that he's just been going through the motions. He started seeing a therapist, which Mark and I encouraged. He says it's helping him to process his feelings and to figure out what he wants for the future. He's not sure if he wants to stay married to Carol, even if she does apologize. He says he needs to think about what's best for him, for once. Mark is fully supportive of his dad, whatever he decides. He's just glad that John is finally standing up for himself. As for me, I'm trying to focus on Lily and on creating a peaceful, loving home for our family. I'm still hurt and angry about Carol's behavior, but I'm trying not to let it consume me. I've started thinking about going back to work part-time. My maternity leave is almost over, and I miss using my skills. Mark is completely on board, and John has offered to help with childcare. We're also starting to plan Lily's first birthday party. It's going to be a small, intimate gathering, just close family and friends. Obviously, Carol won't be invited. It's strange to think about celebrating a major milestone without Mark's mother present, but I honestly don't see any other option. She's made her choice, and she has to live with the consequences. I'm still hoping that, someday, she'll come to her senses and apologize. But I'm not holding my breath. Update 4. A few small, but significant, things have happened. First, John filed for legal separation from Carol. He met with a lawyer and decided that it was the best course of action, at least for now. He said he needed to create some formal distance between them. He told Carol about his decision, and she, predictably, did not take it well. She called Mark, screaming and crying, accusing him of turning his father against her. Mark remained calm and told her that John had made his own decision and that she needed to respect it. Then, a few days later, we received a letter from Carol's lawyer. It was a cease and desist letter, demanding that we stop spreading false and defamatory information about her. Apparently, she's claiming that we've been telling people that she's mentally unstable and that she's a bad grandmother. It's completely ridiculous, of course. We haven't been talking about her to anyone, except for John's therapist, which is confidential. We're pretty sure she's just trying to intimidate us and scare us into backing down. Mark consulted with his own lawyer, who advised us to ignore the letter. He said it was baseless and that Carol had no legal grounds to stand on. So, that's where we are. John is legally separated from Carol, and we're dealing with a frivolous legal threat. It's all very stressful, but we're trying to stay strong and united. On a more positive note, Lily is thriving. She's growing and developing so quickly. She started babbling and smiling constantly. She's the most amazing little person, and she brings so much joy into our lives.